You guys remember when I said this about the Nikon Z30? I don't think it'll be that camera where I'm using it all the time. Yeah, I was dead wrong. What's up, y'all? It's Project Photography back with another video, and today, when I first picked up the Nikon Z30 about a year ago, I mainly thought that this would be the camera that I'd use to film myself, mainly because of this fully articulating screen and a few other video features that I found extremely helpful. But what I didn't realize is that this would actually become my primary telephoto camera for landscape photography. But it wasn't until I used this camera plus the 24-200 is when I realized that wait, the Z30 as a telephoto camera is actually incredible, and it all has to do with the APS-C size sensor in the middle. Because it's able to give you a 1.5 times crop on all of your focal length for your lenses, you're able to turn lenses like this 20-400 into a 42-600. Now, that is an absolutely insane focal length to have. I mean, 600 millimeters on the long end is just so long. You're able to capture pretty much any composition you want. But because lenses like this start at around 28 millimeters on the wide side, you're not sacrificing any of that focal length on the wide side in order to use the APS-C size sensor. Because 28 millimeters times 1.5 times is only 42, you still have a lot of room between the wide end and the long end. Now, I know what you're gonna say, but isn't full frame sensors better than APS-C size sensors when it comes to image quality? So why wouldn't you just use that for your telephoto lens? And honestly, you're right. Full frame sensors are better than APS-C size sensors when it comes to image quality, especially in areas like dynamic range. But here's the thing, with a Z30, because you're using it as a telephoto camera, you're able to capture things like HDRs in particular, which is amazing for increasing dynamic range, which is a big weak point of something like a APS-C size sensor in the Z30. And because we're using a telephoto camera, our subject matters won't be moving, which is why we're able to capture those HDRs. And once we do that, the images are really good. And honestly, even without the HDRs, the images are more than acceptable for landscape photography. And trust me, someone that's really picky with their image quality, I have no complaints when it comes to the Z30. But hold on a second, one area that APS-C size cameras actually do have an advantage over full frame cameras, mainly when it comes to full frame lenses in particular, is that when you're using an APS-C size camera, you're able to only use the center best portion of the image circle that the lens is able to provide. This means that we're gonna have very limited vignetting since we don't have to use the corners of the image. And what's really interesting to me is that with a lens like the 20-400, that gets quite dark at around 200 millimeters by going to f8. This is a lens that you normally have to stop down to f11 on a full frame camera to mitigate that vignetting. But honestly, with the Z30, I've been getting away with shooting it at f8 and we still get quite clean vignetting performance, which is a major advantage again of having that APS-C size sensor. So before moving on to our next part, let's take a quick break and talk about our partners over at Fioboc. This is Fioboc, an activewear clothing brand with beautiful pieces. They sent me 3 of their best pieces, including their modal blend long sleeve tee that's super soft and fits right to my build. Next up is their gentle knit crew neck sweater. And more recently, I started to appreciate these kind of sweaters, and this one is super cozy while keeping me really warm. And then we move on to my favorite piece, the Dreamwear Italian linen pants. And I got mine in their linen color, and these pants are straight fire. They're super lightweight, with the pants providing a loose fit through the bottom of the pants, which I personally love since they go so well with my high top shoes, which I wear all the time. So if you wanted to check out their clothing, visit the link in my description and use my code TPP20 for 20% off. Thank you to Fioboc for partnering with us in today's episode. Now let's get back and talk about the Nikon Z30. So let's dive into some of the ergonomics of the Z30, because to me, this is actually quite a strong suit of this camera. I mean, just look at this thing. It's absolutely tiny, super slim and really compact. But there's one issue. When using it with something like the Nikon 20-400, which is quite a big lens. I mean, look at this. When you zoom this all the way, that is almost twice the size. And especially pairing it with a super slim, super light, compact Z30, we do have a lens balancing issue. I found that when pairing these two combinations, it does get quite lens heavy, especially when putting on a tripod. When you put it on the tripod, you have to remember that is going to be on the actual camera itself rather than on the lens, unless of course you have a tripod collar. 20-400 does not have that. So when I would put the lens on and I would zoom out, the camera would actually sag quite a bit because this is just such a small and light camera. And I really had to mitigate that a lot. I would find myself adjusting my composition quite a bit, and that is something that I definitely had to be mindful of, especially when shooting landscape photography at those really long focal lengths. But if I'm being real with you, the Z30's form factor is actually a huge win for landscape photography. And this isn't something that I really thought about when buying this camera, but when using it, I absolutely think that this is a major advantage of the Z30. First of all, because we have no viewfinder, it is just so thin and compact. I mean, take a look at how small that is. It's just absolutely insane. And it being lightweight in particular really helped keep the weight down, especially when I was traveling to Hawaii, for example. I was able to bring the 28-400 along with it. But some of the other major features on here that I really loved is having this big, massive record button. Now, this is normally for video in particular, but for me as a landscape photographer, I programmed this to be my punch-in, so at 2x magnification. This is really nice, especially for checking focus, making sure that everything is nice and sharp. Also with Z30, we get a nice deep ergonomic grip, which you really can't say about a lot of other camera manufacturers that make these smaller cameras. They normally sacrifice on this part. But with Nikon, I really love the fact that they just keep these deep grips in. It makes it so much more comfortable to hold and use. And I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this next part, but here's a hot take. I actually like the flip screen. I think it's good for landscape photography. And yep, I said it. And this is normally a feature that'd be good for a lot of like video creators in particular, because you're able to see yourself when you're filming, which is actually what I'm using right now with my Z6 III. But for landscape photographers, I think this is really good because you're able to especially see it in vertical orientation. This is not something you can do with something like a Nikon Z6, which only has a two-way tilting screen. I understand in horizontal orientation, this is a little bit more difficult to craft those compositions because your screen is off to the side rather than being directly behind the camera. Makes it just a little bit offset, a little more off-putting. But overall, I think it is a benefit to have. Trust me, I'd rather have a flip screen than no flipping articulating screen at all. And one thing I'm really happy about after using this for a year is that it actually held up really well when it comes to fighting against the elements. It doesn't have any major signs of wear and tear, and it held up pretty nicely actually. And trust me, I beat the crap out of my gear. This camera held up really well, so I don't really have an issue throwing it into really harsh conditions. But one major gripe that I do have with the Nikon Z30 is the battery life. It isn't great, to be honest with you. Even when I'm shooting photography, I find myself changing it out quite frequently, especially on those longer, more intense landscape shoots where we have more sun beating down on us, or we're just out shooting for a quite long time. I do find myself changing the battery out quite a bit. If there's something that can be improved in this camera, it definitely is the battery life. And let's jump into some of my final thoughts about the Z30 after using it for a year. And to be honest with you, I bought this because I wanted a camera to be able to film myself, and man, I stand corrected. This is not just a camera to film myself. This is my main telephoto camera for landscape photography. And honestly, rightly so. This camera's APS-C size sensor makes telephoto lenses just better overall. And I feel like the telephoto lens actually complements the APS-C size sensor in here by allowing you to shoot those HDRs, because your subject matters that are far away generally won't be moving. And using the Z30 just made me realize how badly, how desperately I want Nikon to come out with a pro level APS-C size body. Like, just imagine this. We have a pro level body that is in the form factor of, let's just say even like a Z6 III, Z6, with better EVF, better dynamic range, better weather sealing, dual card slots. I mean, that would be an insane camera. And it would still keep all the benefits of an APS-C size sensor by having that 1.5 times crop on all of your lenses. That's especially great for telephoto lenses, only being able to use the center portion of full frame lenses in particular. And honestly, I just want a pro level APS-C size body. I've been asking for that for a while, and I really hope Nikon comes out with one relatively soon. But yeah, going back to the Z30, I really think that this is actually an incredible budget option for a lot of landscape photographers that want that second camera body or just want to ball on a budget, because you can find these pretty easily for about $400 to $500 used on eBay. And for a camera, that's an insane price. So for getting into the Z system, I think this is a great entry-level camera, or if you're already in it, this is a great camera for your telephoto use cases like I use it for in professional work. So thank you guys so much for experiencing the world with me today. And if you have any questions about the Z30, feel free to let me know down in the comment section down below. What would you use the Z30 for? I also want to hear about that too. But yeah, I stand corrected on this camera. It's amazing. And for landscape photography, this will be the camera that I use for quite a while. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.